Hi, folks. It's Matt Hillen from the Office of Employment and Training. We have a guest today giving our WIOA Wednesday webinar. It's Dr. Brian Durham from the Illinois Community College Board. He's the Deputy Director for Academic Affairs, and he's going to be talking about not only the critical importance of career pathway building in WIOA services, but he's also going to be talking a little bit about the construction of those career pathways. Very important, especially given that we're about to release a new opportunity for youth career pathway funding that'll hopefully be coming out this week. And so Dr. Durham's going to go in depth on career pathways ahead of that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Durham, and we thank everyone for joining us today.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And before we get started, I want to make sure we're getting all the polling stuff out of the way so I can see what we're doing here. Am I going to be able to control these slides, Chelsea? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and
okay.
No, you're fine, Brian. In the bottom left of the PowerPoint, you should see a left and right arrow.
Got it.
So you should see the option to switch to your next one when you need to.
Thank you very much. Well, folks, thanks. There's a lot of people that have joined. I appreciate you taking the time. Tell you a little bit beyond Matt's introduction to my involvement with career pathways, and then we'll jump in. And I certainly want to entertain any questions and invite any of my colleagues at the end to make any comments alongside this work. We've been working on career pathways at the Community College Board and certainly, obviously, across the state for a number of years. And in particular, I've worked through my role in post-secondary Perkins on programs of study, which are a key component of career pathway system, and also serve currently as a member of the IWIB Youth Task Force, the Apprenticeship Task Force, and the WIOA Interagency Team. So though I'm not directly one of the 4 core partners in WIOA, the Perkins program is represented by our agency, and that is one of the required partners. I also have a pretty extensive background in continuous quality improvement, and we've done a ton of work in that area here in Illinois as well. And as you see, as we talk through this webinar, I see that as pretty critical to a career pathway system. We're going to go over several things in this webinar. I have to say right up front, the field of career pathways is very large, and this is definitely not an exhaustive conversation. And so please feel free to follow up with me, and I'm happy to provide any additional resources. And in fact, I'm sure that for everything that I do say, with all the different stakeholders that are here, you'll see some things that I don't say, and I think that it's important to recognize how broad of a field this is. I focused on some of the work in this webinar. I'll be focused on the work in Illinois in the context of a couple of different areas. What I don't touch on much, and this is just to highlight how diverse this is some of the work that actually is going on through the U.S. Department of Education. Many of you may have seen an announcement about advancing career pathways work that's going on. There's a meeting in Chicago on that on November 14th, for example. And then the State Board of Education has been working through the New Skills for Youth project where they're working to build career pathways specifically related to K-12 education, and they are, along with a number of other partners and agencies, attempting to get some additional resources to move that forward. So with that said, we'll jump in. Here are some of the things that I am going to hit upon. We do have an hour and a half, so we've got a lot of time to go over things. I won't promise to take up, or I will promise that I probably won't take up all that time. But we're going to kind of touch on all this different work here. The other thing I promised is, generally speaking, I will not read the slides to you. I expect that you folks can read those, and I'll try to add some supplemental information as we go along. So I say that, and then the first couple of slides, it's really important that I do say a little bit about. One is that I believe that career pathways, and we have lots of definitions, and we're going to talk about some of those, but ultimately it's about continuous improvement and connecting the systems that we have that are already strong, built upon decades of work that's been going on, and experience that we have in workforce, adult ed, vocational rehab, across the LWIAs, in WIA, Perkins, all the other partners. We are building upon the shoulders of giants, if you will, of years and decades of hard work in this area. So in one sense, though career pathways may strike you as a new concept, in another, this is really what we already do in workforce and education and across support systems. It's really about tying them together better. It's important to point out, and I think we fall into this sometimes with these different conversations, career pathways is not a panacea for all things wrong with education. And we have to be careful not to see this reform or this initiative or this approach any differently from others in that sense. It is not going to fix all the problems. It's not going to solve all the connections, and it is ultimately about continuing to improve all along. A favorite quote of mine from Karl Popper, a theory that explains everything explains nothing. And I think particularly when you get outside of the practitioner realm into some of the more theoretical and where people are trying to sell products and et cetera, you can really get in a situation where everything becomes a career pathway, or everything becomes college and career readiness, if you want to think about another area where some of these big conversations have taken place. But you do ultimately have to limit, even if it's a broad and complex web of work and information, you do have to think about what is and what is not a career pathway, because we can't, much like it's not a panacea, we can't allow it to explain everything, because then it just becomes another layer over the work that's already happening. So it is really important that we understand what we mean when we talk about career pathways. So I'm going to get into some definitions, and I'm going to start here. Now, I think arguably we could go back, like as I said, and you could look at the history of workforce legislation. You can go way back to CETA, MDTA, if I'm getting that right, JTPA. You can do the same across the Perkins areas, et cetera, et cetera. You could look at some of the work out of the State Directors of Career and Technical Education and the 16 career clusters. But ultimately, we have to start somewhere. And I think one of the defining moments for career pathways was really when the HHS, the Department of Education, and the Department of Labor released a letter that indicated their commitment to career pathways. And here's the definition that they lay out, and there's some common elements you will see in this definition that is endorsed by all three of these agencies and all three of the folks that were in charge of these efforts that are cited there. And you'll see some common elements here that you're going to see in other definitions. There's connections, there's alignment, there's support services, which I think is a really defining piece of how to build a strong career pathway. There's this notion of industry relevance, and this notion, this idea that folks have to advance to higher levels. And I think this is one of the things that differentiates the concept of career pathways from some previous workforce efforts, particularly around concepts like Work First, where it was all about putting people to work as quickly as possible in whatever they could get, and then certainly that was my interpretation. And this is really much more career pathway concept focused on preparing people, preparing clients or students so that they can go into work, and then they can also advance and come back if they want to. So that's just one, and there are many of these definitions. And I think for the folks many of the folks that are on this webinar, this WIOA definition is going to be one that you have seen and one that you are probably living by every day. Whether you're in Title IV, Title II, Title I, what have you, this definition is going to have some impact on you. And you can see that there's some matchup to some of the things that I've already mentioned: connections, alignment, support services. I've highlighted or underlined, if you will, some of the key phrases. I think that ultimately, about preparing an individual to be successful, what is really, I think, stands out here different in some ways from some of the other definitions, though, is that notion and focus on apprenticeships, because apprenticeships are mentioned explicitly here in this definition, and that's pretty new as far as the conversation around career pathways to so explicitly focus on one area. And I'm not going to get much into apprenticeship, but I will say that there is a ton of work going on right now in that area through the IWIB. The community college system is working on an agreement now around the appropriate credit hours to award for apprenticeships. Of course, there are some big federal grants, and then work on what's called the Apprenticeship Plus model that's going on right now that focuses on not only on registered apprenticeships, but also on some defined work-based learning experiences. But you can see there many of the elements that we're going to see over and over as we think about defining career pathways. As we think about career pathways, we have to think about career pathway systems, and we have to think about career pathway programs. And much like there are many definitions, there are also several different approaches to the elements of a career pathway system. And I apologize, this graphic is not fantastic, but this is the Department of Labor's elements of a career pathway system. The Department of Ed has some of these. We're going to see a couple of others that are out there. But again, you see a lot of the same kind of things. You've got the identification of the sector, so there's a sector focus. You've got that notion of designing programs, identifying, or what we often refer to and hear conversations about, grading funding, that notion of alignment that I mentioned earlier that you saw in that definition from the joint letter, measurement. Now, we're all very familiar with measurement and performance measurement, and it is just as central, if not more so, to the DOL elements of a career pathway system. And then partnerships, building cross-agency partnerships and clarifying roles. All of these are important elements, and we're not going to take a huge deep dive into those, but just to show that DOL has some elements, and then we've also got others that cut across different initiatives. And I want to talk a little bit about one of those, which is the Alliance for Quality Career Pathways, which, as you'll see, looks very similar. Now, the Alliance work is some work that actually going back many years here in Illinois, the state, DCO, ICCB, other partners were engaged in that really fundamentally was about developing a framework for measuring and for building career pathway systems. And if you look at it, you've got engaging employers, sector strategies, et cetera, very much similar to the things you see in the DOL definition. So, you want folks to have a vision. You want that vision to be developed in conjunction with state partners. You want that vision to encompass youth and adults, and to buttress, if you will, strategy for building, scaling, and sustaining the career pathway system. Employers, I think employers are obviously critical to WIOA. They were critical to WIA. Their role seems to even be heightened in WIOA. It's important that, and the AQCP as well as DOL sees that idea of engaging employers as central. There has to be collaboration in order for career pathways to work. Each system must identify, prioritize, and leverage resources available for a career pathway system to work. There has to be implementation of supportive local and regional policies. And what that means is we can't just sign an MOU. We have to actually make policy changes that are going to impact students, ultimately, that are going to make a difference in these career pathway programs that this system is putting together. You got to use data and share measures, and we're going to get into a little bit later about what some of these measures and how some of that might look through the alliance work. And you have to use integrate evidence-based practices and processes that provide essential features and functions in a quality career pathway program. So you actually have to go out and measure success and engage in continuous improvement to develop and integrate evidence-based practices. So you have to base it on things that work, and that's a pretty key element here. Now, I don't know if you'll agree with me as you look through all this stuff, but one of the challenges and one of my goals is to simplify the understanding of career pathways for folks, because it is such an incredibly complex space. And to do that, I did a pretty extensive search of sources and research and such to find something that would help do that. And ultimately, I ended up looking at a request for information that was related to that letter that I think really lays out what some of the important elements of a career pathway system are. And for that matter, many of these elements translate well to a career pathway program. You want aligned systems. You want those systems to be connected and sequential and efficient. And they need to be flexible. I mean, I won't read the whole list to you there, but you've got a lot of different components that have to be part of that system. Now, one of the challenges, and this I'll take you back to that earlier statement about not defining something that defines everything defines nothing, is that in order for these elements to really work, we have to really assess and judge where we are in the context of these. And so at some point, you can say you have an aligned system, but you have to be engaging in some improvement processes to determine just how aligned they are. Because one could argue that Illinois has aligned systems as a state. But then you dig a little deeper and find that maybe that alignment isn't so great. And so do we have a career pathway system in this state or not? And I think that you can make arguments both ways, but ultimately there has to be some kind of way to judge that and look at it. And these are some of the areas or elements that I see are really important when it comes to thinking about what a career pathway system looks like. So I want to talk a little bit about some steps to building a career pathway system. And again, I looked around and did some work and thought about how we could look at this from a simplified, easy to understand format that would help folks get a sense of what we have to do. Because obviously, the devil here is in the details. The devil's in the details, and it's easy enough for me or anyone else to say you have to do a gap analysis, but you really to understand that, you got to take a deep dive. But in doing the gap analysis, and by the way, I went to Davis Jenkins and Chris Spence's work on career pathways here, and all these resources are cited at the end to kind of lay this out and think about how we would go about building that career pathway system. Now, remember, when we build that career pathway system, we wanted to connect to and build upon all these different elements, whatever definition we may decide to use that have some common ground, but we want them to build on or connect to those different elements. So first, let me talk a little bit about a gap analysis. So you're all going to be familiar with what a gap analysis is. You've done these in different places, and certainly if you've been a partner in the planning of your regional WIOA plan, then you did one for that. But basically in a gap analysis, you want to target industries and jobs that are going to both support the region economically, but also are going to provide opportunities for advancements for students. And to do that, you want to look at labor market data, think about strengths and weaknesses. You might do something as simple as pulling some data and looking at percentages, or you could certainly do something more statistically relevant. There are a number of other sources you can look at to get there. Ultimately, though, the goal is to figure out where needs are not being met. You can do that if you think about a career pathway program for a moment, you can do that all the way at that level to a program level, where you're looking very closely at a particular program. But when we're thinking about a system, we're really thinking regionally and much more broadly here. And you have to think about the return on investment as well as a part of that. The next piece is you want to engage, and if I have to say anything is the most important, this has got to be it. Form a partnership to develop career pathways plan. You have to organize your stakeholders, you have to pull your people together, and you have to do it early, and you have to involve them from the beginning. And I think we've all been in situations and in initiatives where we have kicked it off and had a bunch of initial conversations and then thought, oh my gosh, we need to invite DCO to this conversation, or we need to invite the Cook County Workforce Board, or we need to invite the city colleges, or what have you. And you know, of course, you have to go back over ground then. It's difficult sometimes to engender trust in those situations. So it's really critical that you think about and organize partnerships from the get-go. And part of that is involving employers. And I won't pretend to be an expert. I think the folks on the webinar, many of you are much more expert in this area than I am. But I think we all know that involving employers involves not only choosing the right employers, but choosing the right time to connect those employers. And you want those employers to help you map the structure of jobs and job requirements and advancement of pathways in whatever particular industry sector that you might choose. So if you're working in manufacturing, then obviously you want to involve the largest manufacturer in your region in that conversation. But you also want a cross-section of manufacturers. What you don't want is a kitchen cabinet, if you will, of folks that you've always engaged with that can be co-opted into a conversation. So you want a diversity of employers. You want a diversity of folks at the table. You want people that are going to help you rethink programs and services so that supports both entry into a career and advancement in those particular targeted sectors, and that can identify what are the needs. One of the things we do here at the Community College Board when we approve programs, for example, is we require colleges to demonstrate labor market demand, but also to give us a list of and demonstrate what employers they're working with. And our hope and our goal is that they are engaging those employers in their particular advisory committees for whatever program they may be applying for. So if they're doing colleges applying for a welding program, we would expect to see obviously some welders, but certainly manufacturers on that list, potentially agriculture where welders may be needed in those kind of areas, different kinds of manufacturing, whatever there may be in the particular area. Because ultimately rethinking those programs and services and improving them continuously, if I can return to that term, is really the key. And you have to, one, make sure that we don't allow credit creep, looking at it from a college perspective, or if you want to look at it from more of a workforce perspective, we don't want competency creep in the sense that the teachers and the faculty alone are dictating what the students or the clients might need to go into those. We want that to be driven by employers. And so it's important to involve a healthy cross-section of employers. And you have to identify costs and figure out how to pay for it. I mean, none of this is doable if you don't do a real cost analysis and think about what your career pathway plan is going to look like and how much it's going to cost to actually get it off the ground and get these kind of changes made that need to be made. And there are, your knee-jerk reaction might be, particularly if you're in education, well, what can the cost be? But, if you're running a welding program or if you're doing a training program around welding, you obviously want state-of-the-art equipment because you want folks to be working on the equipment they're going to use at a work site. And if you determine that you need a new program, there's going to be those kind of startup costs. And in the end, for this component around planning, you're going to want to develop a communications plan. You're going to want to work with folks to make sure that the community is bought in, that stakeholder engagement is real. And, you could see this whole arrow really on a loop because if you get the right partners and involve the employers from the get-go, then that communication plan in some ways will write itself. So thinking about how you're going to put that together and then thinking about implementation, you get down into some of the brass tacks of what does it actually look like to get the work done for a career pathway system. And this is where those of us that work in government understand very well this idea of establishing an MOU. But there's an MOU and there's an MOU. And the important thing for an MOU is that you specify the roles and commitments and contributions of each partner, including employers. And again, a place to have employers bought into that from the beginning. Because if you specify those roles and those commitments effectively, then you're going to run into less problems later. And I know that many of you, if not all of you, have been involved in the negotiation of MOUs of late, and I'm sure that you would all agree that it was a very fulfilling experience. And though I'm listening to silence, I can certainly expect some people are snickering at that notion because I can't imagine that it is. But ultimately, it's important up front to get it right so that you don't run into issues and problems later. And in the end, it all comes down to how do you coordinate the work of the partners, and that includes things like program development, marketing and recruitment for this career pathway system, delivery of programs, what are the programs that you're talking about, and support services, and how you track the outcomes, how you track those outcomes. And none of it is worth anything if you're not doing some kind of evaluation and continuous improvement of programs and services. Remember what I said at the beginning, it's all about improving and continuing to improve the work that you have been doing for decades and improving that work, making it better, connecting it, building those integrated systems, moving beyond just signing on to things and actually integrating services and braiding funding. And that's going to take some things like regular reviews of what's happening in your various career pathway programs in an area. It's certainly going to require tracking outcomes over time, and I think it's going to require more than just relying on those performance measures that we all have to answer to in various programs. But I think everybody's pretty good at doing those kind of reviews and looking at the outcomes, and particularly those required measures. What we're not great at is adjusting based upon what that information tells us and evidence from the program all the time, because we get entrenched in the way that we do things. And it's important to follow through with that part of it as well. You have to make adjustments based on evidence. You have to base those adjustments on impacts. And you have to sometimes come back to and reevaluate the mission, vision, and goals of what you're doing. And that's going to take you, all the way, if I can go back in my slideshow a little, that'll take you back to here. You may have to go back here to reevaluate that stuff. And you may have to think about what you're doing in all these other areas as well. And then you're engaging in that, and that, maybe you start off by building a career pathway system, if you will, and you've got a couple of programs, or they're deciding on programs, and you're working through what those are. I mean, ultimately, the goal is to build this out. And so you're going to repeat this. You're going to do all those steps again, or whatever steps that you at your local area have decided are the important steps that get at those things. And you're going to have to divide those in certain ways. I mean, you may decide you want to look at populations, or you want to move from healthcare to manufacturing because you have a need in both areas. Or the state has identified IT as an area of need, and you have a strong IT economy in your area. Or you may, if you're in manufacturing, you may want to target a specific group of students, or a specific population, or a specific geographic region. And I think you've always have to be thinking about how to include other organizations in this work, because it's going to be really critical that you're constantly refreshing. I think one of the big mistakes that we made early on in the Karl Perkins work and building programs of study was this idea that doing it was a terminal process. You'd build a program, or you'd build a career pathway, and then you'd be done. And ultimately, you have to always be refreshing these things through continuous improvement, through looking at these other organizations, through thinking about who these other populations are that you want to include. And, organizations leave and others come in. And it's a big task. I mean, it really is a big task. The good news, and I just pulled a few examples or slides or graphics, if you will, from the Illinois WorkNet and to demonstrate that, the good news is you are already doing a lot of these things. Some you're going to do really well. Some places may be great at building strong partnerships, but not so great at accessing all populations in their region. And so you're going to have to think about that, and those are the kind of things that are going to come up as you do your planning and as you do your gap analysis and such. But you have a framework out there. You have a lot of work that's happened. I mean, there are a lot of things going on in this area that have been successful and that are ongoing and that are really doing and touching upon all the things that I'm talking about. Another example where this is self-assessment questions around integrating a regional plan framework, where folks are doing exactly the kind of things that I'm talking about. You have, for example, strategy, align, and integrate economic development, workforce development, and education at the state and regional level. And the critical component here is, and again, this is just one of these examples, is that you're looking at kind of where you fall on that spectrum. And I think that takes us back to, what does that gap analysis look like, those elements of a career pathway that were on, that long list of elements, and, are you aligning here? Where do you fall on that continuum? If you went across all this and you had 10 strategies to look at, and you had a have not started on all of them or just beginning, you probably don't have a career pathway system, and you've got some work to do. On the other hand, if you're hitting 3s, 4s, and 5s, you've obviously got work to do, but you're going to be further along in that. And this is just another example of some of the work that all of you have already done, and looked at that's out there, or is available to you if you haven't, through the state of Illinois, that are hitting on a lot of these things we're talking about. You know, here an example, and I blacked out the names of the areas, an example of some findings you might have through a gap analysis. Again, taken directly from, these are taken from a regional plan. They're looking at the data, doing a gap analysis, and discovering that they need to engage in different recruitment strategies, or they have to require more work-based learning activities. Have to refer more incarcerated individuals for OJT. You know, dual credit is in there. So there are some things that have to be done in this region that they determined and identified in their gap analysis, in their work. And what's important, of course, is that they move forward and actually track the progress of those things and think about what they are doing for both current and future implications. But again, another example of the work that's already happening. An example of data analysis that's going on. This is, if you are from this region, you may recognize yourself in it, but looking at some of the data and how that data informs, and you can of course take this data and do a much deeper dive into all the things that, and all the populations and all the information you may need, hopefully, in your area as you conduct the gap analysis and engage in the building of a career pathway system. Now that's my only big red X, more or less, X circle, whatever, I don't know what that thing's called, but when you organize for career pathways and you build a career pathway system, the one thing you don't do is you don't operate in silos. And you know, I have to be honest, we all use that language and that symbolism, and sometimes I have a little trouble with it because I think ultimately everybody works together often and as much as they can. But I think the real difference is, and the way we move away from operating in silos, is that we have to not only work together, but we also have to plan and build these systems together. And in doing so, we have to probably let go a little bit of our turf. And you know, I'll be the first to say that's not the easiest thing for me to do any more than it is for anybody else. But the truth of the matter is it's about students, and we have to think beyond the silos and beyond the big red X if we can here. One of the things we also think about, and one of the ways to organize for career pathways, and I really like this approach, and I will say it's not the only approach, through and based upon the community impact theory, and I think we have to credit NIU and Andrea and John Furr and their team with bringing some of this conversation to Illinois. Really, the idea of a backbone organization, or what I would look at as kind of a neutral party in the development and sustaining and organizing, convening, putting together the career pathway system, because it's a lot of work and there are a lot of partners, and unlike the days where we could build static relationships, if those ever truly existed, there are so many moving parts and moving components of this, you almost need someone dedicated to and focused on just pulling this together. And you have some good examples of this out there in the state. You've got the Nexus group up north, you've got certainly NIU again I'll mention, you've got, in a little bit different context, you've got some work out of Elgin, you've got Rockford Alliance that does some of this. I mean, there are a number of them, and I think the key is that there is a neutral party that works as a convener, that works to pull all the elements together and keep folks moving forward. And, of course, there are other models. I mean, you can have one that is partner-led. So, you know, if the community college board was positioned to drive this forward, then maybe we would be the primary convener of a career pathway system or any of the other agencies, DCO, voc rehab, whoever it may be, from a state perspective. And locally, maybe it is community college, maybe it's the local workforce board. It really is going to depend. Certainly, you can do this, and it could be potentially business-led, where you've got kind of a business convener at the center. You can hire a center to do it. You could have the funding streams, which I think is kind of the if you want to call it a classical model, kind of the normal model. The funding streams drive it all. And I think those are out there, and I think that, whatever it may be, you really got to have somebody who's in charge of convening this stuff, and this is just one of the ways, and I think a really good and important example of how it can be done. Organizing the work and pulling folks together. Let's talk a little bit about career pathway programs. You may be able to hear the sirens behind me there. Sorry about that. Working here in downtown Springfield, we get to hear a lot of it. 3 features of a quality career pathway. Again, these all are going to cut across everything that you've already seen, but a pathway has many of the same features as what you saw in the elements of a career pathway system. Well-connected, a variety of services, multiple entry points, targeted populations, and multiple exit points. And I put this in here because this is from the Alliance for Quality Career Pathways. Again, work that we've been very deeply involved in here in Illinois. And what the Alliance identifies as the 4 really essential functions of a quality career pathway. And I would say at the center of this, and I think maybe the heart of the change from a whatever was before career pathways to a career pathway system, is that participant-focused, individualized nature of the programs and the ability to on and off ramp based upon those individual needs. Now, as an academic guy, and working very closely with faculty and educators in the system, the first knee-jerk reaction that you hear when you talk about something like that is, well, what are we just going to sacrifice rigor? Are we going to sacrifice quality in order to do this? And the answer to that is absolutely not, and I would never, nor I think would most of us ever argue for or support a position where we sacrificed rigor, where we sacrificed relevance. In fact, relevance is more important to build better rigor. But participant-focused is no longer the world of just one way of doing education and training. There have to be multiple options. I mean, we can never hit our completion goals in the state for the higher ed system, for example, if we don't go to and train and educate adults as well as traditional age students. So that participant-focused is very important. And with that, non-duplication. I mean, nobody wants to take the same courses over and over. Nobody wants to do the same training over and over if they can demonstrate their competencies and move forward. And all of it, wrapped up in all of it, is that support services. You know, yet another key addition as a system, support services. I think we've worked in those silos to meet those needs, but thinking about how support services can really be an integral component and an area that often gets lost in the conversation when we are talking about building these kind of systems, or in the past at least. And of course, work-based experiences. None of this is worth anything if we don't have people engaged in, as close as possible, work-based learning, work-based experiences, back to that issue of relevance and rigor through relevance. You got to have work experiences. Excuse me. So I just touched on work-based experience or work-based learning. Sample program components, and I think this is one of those areas where we have to be careful because there are lots and lots of sample components, and people can argue for each and every one. I mean, you could certainly argue that work-based learning is important. You can argue that from a community college perspective that remediation is important. You can argue for a variety of different components, but again, it comes back to that participant-focused, individualized. So with work-based learning, all participants engage in personalized and coordinated continuum of learning that is connected to work and that helps them master competencies. Career-focused instruction, I mean, I think we've hit on that pretty significantly. Relevance, real-life situations and experiences, and that's the important piece. And I know intuitively we all understand this. I think the challenge is sometimes how do we connect it across systems and how do we build it in a way that they're authentic career-focused instructional sequences, authentic experiences. Progressive design, that gets at that non-duplicative piece and the notion of stackable credentials, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But basically, if you master a set of competencies or if you meet the needs of a particular course or you meet the needs of a particular training module, you meet the requirements, that there is a next step from there, and that's for all things, that there are no dead ends, if you will. There has to be a progressive design. Dead-end programs that lead to dead-end training that leads to $10 an hour jobs and nowhere else have no place in a career pathway system. And we mentioned supports over and over, but making sure that we have support services, and make sure that those support services are not only about getting people things like childcare and transportation and assistance, but also about how to navigate the career field. So there's career supports that are a part of this as well. Thinking at it from a little bit of a different perspective, from a population point of view. Because we're going to have to serve different populations, and different populations are going to have different needs. And where the LWIA may be the primary point of contact for one client type, the high school might be the primary point of contact for another. And so there's going to be different pieces, different players and different components. You know, adult education and ESL students might benefit greatly from bridge programs and integrated education and training programs. High school students may benefit from youth or pre-apprenticeship, dual credit, and some of these certainly cut across. Offenders and ex-offenders can potentially earn some secondary credit or reentry counseling. Returning adults may need financial aid counseling or refreshers in math. And that's not to say that any of these belong in one category only, for sure, but good examples of how things might be a little different across each different population. So, you know, a tremendous amount of complexity here, a tremendous amount of a web of complexity, if you will. We think about different populations, different programs, different sectors. How do we keep them aligned? How do we get all the partners involved? You know, it takes us back to that idea of a convening organization, or of somebody that is really some organization, some people that are helping to lead that charge, helping to pull it together. Just to highlight one or two, because I wanted to give you a couple of examples, real-life examples. Stackable credentials. Here's how we think about stackable credentials in the community college system. And obviously I work for the community college system, so that's where, I'm going to pull my examples or be able to explain them best, but there are many others, of course. We have programs, AAS degrees, so let's say a student wants to go and be a phlebotomist. That student wants to get a 2-year degree in construction, maybe, or, it varies. Certainly we have plenty of them. They might be able to, and there may be built into that, a 12-hour certificate or a 16-hour certificate where they can do that certificate, exit into employment using that certificate. And then if they decide to come back, they can come back and earn, and most importantly, have those credits articulated to that advanced certificate so that they may only need another 18 credits to get that advanced certificate. And similarly onto a degree. And the graphic's pretty self-explanatory. The one thing I will point out is that we also, and I think this is an area where we're learning across the system, across workforce and education, but maximizing industry credentials. So, a basic certificate in HVAC, for example, may also get some kind of safety certification, and they may get a couple of other certificates related to, or credentials related to it. Manufacturing, certainly the big ones, NIMS and MSSC, and how do they fit into this structure? So we want and ask for colleges to embed credentials into those certificates. So you come away with more than just the community college piece. And I know that's true in other areas. And so here's a real example. I won't, this is a little bit dated, so it may not be exactly like this anymore if they've done any changes. But as you can see, and if we walk down this chart a little bit, you will see that students who pass these assessments will be recognized as a certified production technician because they will have taken 4 assessments for an industry-recognized certification. And then they're going to take those classes in the top block, and they're going to pick a specialization. And you will see, let's look at the green, if they go in mechatronics or automation, after they do 10 credit hours, they're going to get an electrical maintenance certificate. And if they add 6 additional hours, they're going to get an industrial electronics certificate. They add 10 more, and they're going to get that mechatronics automation certificate. They add their gen eds, and they can get that degree. So you can see in that scenario, they've got 4 industry-recognized credentials and 3 community college certificates before they ever get to their degree. And so they can do that and can conceivably get it done in a year plus. And they may, if they do go on and do the degree, they might be able to move into an advanced manufacturing baccalaureate program somewhere. And so that's kind of the gist of what we're thinking about when we think about stackable credentials. We want industry credentials embedded, and then we want multiple certificate opportunities across a particular program. And we push back pretty hard here in the community college system on colleges that just want to do a 2-year degree in any technical field because we want to see these kind of things. And the board is very committed to keeping the credit hours for these at a reasonable and manageable level so that students don't get a bunch of extra work and requirements that they don't need. So, if 10-hour certificate, it's determined that that works for employers in that area, then we don't want to give them a 12-hour or 15-hour, 16-hour. We want to give them what they need to go into employment, but also give them that opportunity to come back if they want and get credit for those. I'm going to show you another example, but I felt like I had to show you another model, and this is also, just demonstrating that there are a lot of different models out there. This is the Creating Pathways for Adult Learners model that is really connected to our adult education system here in Illinois that's housed at the Community College Board. And you can see kind of the notion is a student is there and they can go in any number of directions an integrated model. They might be able to do a bridge depending on skill level. They can even do a high school completion. And then from there, they're going to go into college and career opportunities. And so thinking about that, one of the things that is a critical piece of WIOA is that idea of integrated education and training. And the good news in Illinois is we have done these for many, many years. We were a party to a grant through the Jobs for the Future and worked in adult ed and career tech ed to build these, what we called ICAPs, but now this is in the WIOA legislation, integrated in education training programs that basically pair up technical training with basic skills. And so you can see from this that a student that takes GED may also tab into some of these healthcare courses. And you see that if they do a medical terminology course, that they're going to have an opportunity to go into these are credit bearing, by the way, comprehensive medical terminology. So the point of this is that basic skills students are going to college, taking adult ed, while also taking career and technical education, credit bearing career and technical education courses, so that when they finish their GED, or now called high school equivalency, they also come out with a community college certificate. And in doing so, and you have to know this is a sea change for adult ed over the last 5 to 10 years, moving from just educating people to get ready to get that GED to also having an opportunity to educate them for careers. A good example of integration, integrated education and training programs. So moving on, I want to talk a little bit about metrics, and this is one of those areas where so much of this work has to be done locally, and some of it is dictated by state requirements, and some of it is dictated by federal requirements, but I think in the end, it comes down to you have to measure what's happening locally in order to make program changes consistent with what we talked about earlier as it relates to continuous quality improvement. This is the model from the Alliance for Quality Career Pathways work, where you think about both continuous improvement but also performance measurement. And what I've done is on the next slide here, kind of define what each of these are. Criteria refers to high quality systems and programs, so it's kind of that high level. Quality indicators, how well the system and programs are functioning to support achievement. Interim participant outcome metrics, and this is an area where we don't think about a lot. You know, we may look at kind of the quality stuff, and we certainly are thinking about our performance measures, our shared performance measures. But interim, are we achieving progress toward the desired long-term outcomes? And of course, then there are the things we must meet, entered employment, credential attainment, those kind of things that are federally mandated and collected, and we are judged upon by the feds and the state. But, you know, these interim outcomes really do contribute to, I believe, effectively managing the performance outcomes. So I've created here, I've adopted and created what I see as a sample metric, you know, a criterion, and I take a couple of these from the Alliance work and Center for Law and Social Policy, and then build them out into what I see are potential connections to interim and outcome measures. So the criterion, a referral method has been adopted. That's a criterion. The quality indicator, staff are knowledgeable about this and use them to refer clients appropriately. But that sample interim participant outcome metric, that is about assessing whether that quality indicator works. Students who are referred to appropriate services fare better than students who do not receive referrals. And I realize anybody who understands research methods and statistics out there can poke 1,000 holes in my quick example there. But the point is that you're measuring whether students are being referred appropriately and how well those students are doing. And then that, in turn, is going to potentially impact your outcome measures, degree, certificate attainment, or maybe entered employment for adults, or conceivably some of your partner measures. I mean, in Perkins we have some of the same measures. So you got to measure down beyond those, and that's just one way. And I think that I know that there's some thinking on this as it relates to the youth RFP. I'm not exactly sure how much of that I can get into, so I'll leave that to Andrea and Matt if they want to speak to it or not. But you know, the point is you have to measure at a high level and at a low level, or at a more fine-grained level, if you will, in order to really move the needle, in order to affect those outcome measures, but also to make quality improvements in a program. And so you've got all the whole gamut of things collected here. So we went through kind of understanding that a career pathway, you know, it's not a panacea. It is not going to fix every problem. It also can't define everything. You know, if we define everything, then we're challenged then. There are some key elements of a career pathway system, and I think there's, you know, I've provided a pretty good chart of what those are, but the point is alignment, connectivity, employer engagement, relevance, ensuring that there is a connection to actual work, and we have to ultimately use data and evidence to assess what we need to do, and we need to be continuously improving, because what we're doing is continuously improving upon the work we've been doing for all of our careers. So with that said, I am going to turn it back over to the moderators and open it up for any questions anybody might have. I'm happy to try to answer them or take them down and get back to folks if I don't have a good answer. So thank you for listening.
We'll have a few additional things to say after questions are asked and we answer questions, just about the release of the RFA. So.
And there's one question up there, Matt, that I'm going to let you and Andrea tackle. I'm not going to address any questions related to the RFP.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Durham right now? I'll go ahead and just kind of say a couple of things about the release of the RFP. You know, career pathways is a very broad topic, and there are 1,000 things going on out there in pursuit of, of the design and the importance of really good career pathway programming. We, for our part, at the state level, with Brian at ICCB and Jennifer Foster at ICCB and our other core partners, DRS and IDES, are trying to make sure that we're putting together programs that are aligned across and to make sure that when we're talking about career pathways that we're talking about a uniform thing. It's just really hard for all the reasons that Brian just gave you, because it's such a broad topic. But we are doing that, and we're trying to engage with a lot of CBOs as well, and making sure that we're working on all of our systems defining career pathways in the same way. Now that said, there are a whole bunch of different ways that you can approach career pathways. We are going to be releasing the 2017 WIOA Youth Career Pathways, what we used to call an RFA, now under the new GATA law, what we're now going to call a NOFO, or a Notice of Funding Opportunity. That will be released in the next several days. If you are not already signed up, please sign up at IllinoisWorkNet.com for email updates, and make sure that you sign up for the WIOA Works kind of subset. You will see all of the updates from the Office of Employment and Training that way. I think that, also in the coming weeks, you're going to see additional informational and technical assistance webinars that more specifically relate to the RFA. What we wanted to do is make sure that today that we gave a wide view of career pathways so that folks start to get in that mindset, especially because we're putting out this RFA to several different systems. It's not just going out to Title I providers. It's also going out to all the other titles and businesses and anyone who wants to put together these kind of programs. And we are strongly encouraging consortia and partnerships for the application. So we are, like I said, we are going through a little bit of a different process now. We have a little bit of a different process because of the GATA law, and our application process has changed from the last time that those of you who last applied with us through the last youth RFA have seen it. So what you're going to see is visually a little bit different. It's also, programmatically and design-wise a little bit different. There's a self-assessment that's involved. We have some information on building a logic model in there and making sure that every step in building these partnerships is thoughtful, that we're articulating the full partnership around these programs, and that the programs have really thought about what the multiple on-ramps and off-ramps to career pathways are. We've put together something that we think will be new to a lot of systems, but that we think, given the new requirements under WIOA for fully articulated career pathway programming, that we think is kind of the new world that we're living in now, and that we're going to be living in for the long term. So we think that we're going to be releasing something to the system that's going to also help to build capacity. And we're going to do our best to aid that capacity building in giving additional technical assistance, additional instruction. We're going to be doing a series of regional in-person events around the NOFO, and make sure that there are open lines of communication, and that there's a longer time for partnerships to build up to the application deadline. So we're excited to release the document to you and let you know, kind of how we're viewing the future of WIOA Career Pathways programming. And with that, we'll go ahead and kind of defer questions until after that document is released. But to answer the question from Nikki in the comment box, go to any page on IllinoisWorkNet.com, and at the bottom you're going to see a banner that prompts you to sign up for email updates. You will then see kind of a series of things that you can sign up for. You can sign up for one of any number of different email lists that are on different topics, but make sure that the WIOA email lists are indicated as yes boxes, and you'll get all the updates from the Office of Employment and Training here at the Department of Commerce. Andrea, before we let everybody go, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Andrea Messing-Matthews is from NIU, and she's worked with us quite a bit, along with the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board's Youth Committee in drafting the new RFA.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad you could make it to the webinar. I don't have anything new to add. We'll keep you posted on any of the new webinars that will be coming out. On the issue of the logic model, We will actually be doing kind of a webinar/working session on how to actually work through the logic model. So once you get that, don't be too intimidated by that. I think that's something that we can help you work through. So we look forward to helping you through this process.
All right, folks, with that, if there are no additional questions, thank you for participating. Thank you, Dr. Durham, for giving us your time today and giving us such a great presentation on the complexities of career pathway programming.
All right, thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.